Next chapter, sexual reproduction in animals. So we have seen in a sexual reproduction, only a single parent is required, and this parent divides into two or more individuals. In other words, it does not involve gametes. Conversely, sexual reproduction involves two individuals, a male and a female, who produce the male and female gametes that are haploid in nature. These gametes fuse during fertilization to form a diploid zygote. This zygote then grows and divides by mitosis to form an embryo, which eventually becomes a baby. Fertilization can either be internal or external. Internal fertilization involves the fusion of male and female gametes inside the body of the female. Most land animals, birds, reptiles, and insects reproduce sexually by internal fertilization. External fertilization involves the fusion of gametes outside the body. It occurs in amphibians and most fish. External fertilization in amphibians. Amphibians, like frogs, live both on land and in water. During mating, they move into ponds and slow-flowing streams. When the male and the female come together, the female lays eggs as the male sheds sperms on them. The female lays hundreds of eggs, which, unlike the bird's eggs, are not covered by a shell and are therefore very delicate. A layer of jelly holds the eggs together and protects them against predators and harsh conditions. The sperms swim randomly in water with the help of their tail. When they come in contact with the eggs, fertilization takes place. The zygotes then develop in water until they hatch into tadpoles, which look like small fish. These will undergo developmental and morphological changes until they become adults. External fertilization also occurs in corals, oysters, and fish. In this type of fertilization, hundreds of eggs are laid in order to increase the chances of survival, as the eggs are exposed to harsh conditions and also to predators. Parental care is absent in these organisms. Internal fertilization. Internal fertilization occurs in mammals, birds, reptiles, and some insects. After fertilization, some animals lay eggs that are covered with a shell, which will later hatch into young ones. These are called oviparous animals, and the process is called oviparity. It is found in all birds, reptiles, and some arthropods. In most mammals, the fertilized egg or the zygote undergoes full development inside the female's body until it is born as a young one. These animals are called viviparous, and the process is called viviparity. Egg-laying mammals or monotremes include the echidna and the dark-billed platypus. Marsupials, such as kangaroos, give birth to a preterm baby. The baby is placed in a pouch where it is nursed until it has developed enough to be independent. Next, reproduction in human beings. We start with the structure and functions of the male reproductive system. Now, these are the front and the side views of the male reproductive system. It is made up of the following organs and accessory glands. The testes lie outside the abdominal cavity in the scrotal sac. They are made up of highly coiled tubes called the seminiferous tubules, which have actively dividing cells that produce sperms. Interstitial cells between the tubules produce the male hormones called androgens. The most common androgen is testosterone. The seminiferous tubules unite to form the epididymis, which is much more coiled, where sperms mature and are stored. The position of the testis outside the body provides a cool environment which is appropriate for sperm formation and survival. The epididymis is then connected to the vas deferens or sperm duct, which leads to the urethra. The penis is made up of spongy tissues, muscles, and blood vessels. During sexual activity, the spaces in the spongy tissues fill up with blood and the penis erects. This allows for penetration in the vagina for deposition of the sperms into the cervix. The corpus gland on either side of the urethra provides an alkaline fluid during sexual activity that neutralizes the acidity along the urethra due to urine. This ensures the survival of the sperms. The seminal vesicle opens into the urethra and provides an alkaline fluid that nourishes the sperms. Close to the seminal vesicles is the prostate gland, whose alkaline fluid neutralizes the vaginal acidity. All the fluids secreted by these glands combine with the sperms from the sperm duct to form a fluid called the semen. During ejaculation, the semen is discharged through the urethra in the penis and into the cervix of the female. And next, we look at the structure and function of the female reproductive system. Unlike in males, the structures of the female reproductive system are largely located inside the body. They include the ovaries, oviduct or the fallopian tube, uterus, cervix, and the vagina. The ovaries are two cream-colored oval bodies located in the lower abdomen below the kidneys. They are held in place by membranes and supplied with blood by the ovarian arteries and veins. Their function is to produce eggs or ova and the female hormones, especially progesterone and estrogen. The oviduct or the fallopian tube is a ciliated tube with a funnel-shaped opening that receives and conducts the ova released from the ovary. Fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube. The uterus is a thick-walled and muscular organ that is richly supplied with blood. It has a very high potential for expansion, and it is a site for implantation and development of the fetus. The cervix is a muscular ring that separates the uterus and the vagina. It closes the uterus during pregnancy to prevent entry of pathogens. The vagina or the birth canal, also called the copulatory canal, opens to the outside together with the urethra at the vulva. The walls of the vulva have vestibular glands that release mucus during sexual arousal for lubrication during sexual activity. And now, structures of the male and female gametes. The male gametes are called sperms, and the female gametes are called ova. They are produced in special cells within the gonads of the male and females by meiosis, so they are haploid in nature. Now, a typical sperm is covered by a plasma membrane and has 4 distinct parts: a head, neck, a middle piece, and a tail. Inside the head lies an elongated haploid nucleus containing chromosomes. The anterior part of this nucleus is surrounded by acrosome, a cup-like structure filled with lytic enzymes that digest the ovum membrane to allow for sperm penetration. The sperm head is followed by a neck and a middle piece which contains numerous mitochondria. These mitochondria carry out respiration to produce ATP that powers the movement of the sperm. The ovum is filled with cytoplasm called the yolk or vitellus, surrounded by a membrane called the vitelline membrane. The vitelline membrane is enclosed in another membrane called the zona pellucida. However, there is some space between the zona pellucida and the vitelline membrane called the perivitelline space. Surrounding the zona pellucida is a layer of follicle cells called the cells of corona radiata. And now, fertilization. During copulation or sexual intercourse, the sperms are released in the vagina of the female near the cervix. A single ejaculation of a human male may contain more than 400 million sperms. The sperms are highly motile, swimming with the help of their tail, and enter the uterus through the cervix. They move upwards to reach the oviduct. Of the millions of sperms released, only a few manage to reach the upper part of the oviduct, while the majority die. Of the few that reach the upper part of the oviduct, many surround the ovum if it happens to be there. The acrosome of the sperm secretes a lytic enzyme that digests the membrane of the egg, making its way inside. As soon as one sperm enters, further entry of another sperm is prevented by a fertilization membrane. Only the head of the sperm fuses with the nucleus of the ovum, while the tail remains outside. The two haploid nuclei, called pronuclei, fuses together to form a diploid nucleus. Upon fertilization, the former egg cell or the ovum is now called a zygote. The next step is implantation. Now, after fertilization, the zygote undergoes several rounds of mitotic divisions as it moves towards the uterus. By the time it reaches the uterus, it is a hollow structure with few cells called a blastocyst. The attachment of a blastocyst to the uterine wall is called implantation. The inner wall of the uterus, where implantation occurs, is called endometrium. The blastocyst develops finger-like projections that grow into the endometrium. Once implanted, the blastocyst becomes an embryo. The finger-like projections, together with the endometrium, form the placenta. The placenta is the site of exchange of materials between the maternal and fetal blood systems. Oxygen, foods such as glucose, amino acids, fatty acids and glycerols, vitamins, mineral ions, hormones, water and antibodies move across the placenta from the mother to the fetus. Excess water, carbon dioxide and nitrogenous wastes move from the fetus to the mother. Blood cells, plasma proteins, and most pathogens do not cross the placenta in either directions. Drugs, alcohol and some chemicals can pass across the placenta, and such should be avoided during pregnancy unless under the prescription of a doctor. Gestation period is the period between implantation and birth. In humans, it takes 9 months. During this period, the embryo undergoes morphological and developmental changes, leading to formation of all the body organs. Parturition is the birth process. At the end of the gestation period, the fetus as well as the placenta start secreting hormones that set in mild uterine contractions called the fetal ejection reflex. These contractions in turn act on the mother's pituitary gland that now starts secreting oxytocin, a hormone that causes stronger uterine contractions. The contractions become stronger with each passing minute and ultimately results in the expulsion of the baby from the uterus, with the head leading through the widened cervix. For normal delivery to occur, the cervix widens up to at least 10 centimeters in diameter to allow for the head to pass. The placenta is then expelled after birth. Birth occurs before 6 months, the baby will not survive, and it's called a miscarriage. Abortion is any deliberate interference with the pregnancy, leading to expulsion of the fetus. Premature birth is when the birth occurs after 7 months. Preterm babies can survive if given proper care. Cesarean section is a surgical procedure that involves the incision of the abdomen to remove the fetus in cases where normal delivery appears impossible or risky to either the mother or the child. Now, the female reproductive system is supported by the mammary glands. The mammary glands or breasts are modified sweat glands that lie over the pectoral muscles. They contain a glandular tissue and a variable amount of fat. Internally, each breast is divided into 15 to 20 mammary lobes containing clusters of cells called the alveoli. The alveoli open into the mammary tubules. The tubules of each lobe join to form the mammary duct. Several ducts join to form a wider ampulla which is connected to the lactiferous duct. The lactiferous duct opens through the nipple from which milk is sucked out. Hormonal changes causes the cells of the mammary glands to differentiate, resulting in these glands producing milk by a process called lactation towards the end of pregnancy. Milk letdown is a reflex action which is influenced by the prevailing environmental conditions and can be positive or negative. In a positive environment, milk letdown is triggered by the sucking of the breast, crying of the baby, and cytosmell of the baby. In a negative environment, milk letdown is inhibited if the mother experiences distractions, embarrassment, anxiety, or fatigue. And now we'll look at the roles of hormones in human reproduction. Now, throughout the life of an individual, changes in the body are triggered by the secretion of various hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers that are secreted from the ductless endocrine glands. Ductless means the organs or the glands lack vessels or tubes to carry the hormones they secrete. Instead, the hormones are released directly into the bloodstream and are carried throughout the body until they reach their target cells. From birth till puberty, growth hormones are most active. During puberty, reproductive hormones get released, which leads to the transition of a child into an adult. And these hormones start declining in later stages of life. The major hormones involved in function of the male reproductive system are the follicle-stimulating hormone or FSH, luteinizing hormone LH, and testosterone. At puberty, the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin-releasing hormone. This hormone stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete the follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, which are collectively called the gonadotropic hormones. Their target organs are the testes. In the testes, the follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the production and maturation of sperms, a process called spermatogenesis. The luteinizing hormone, also called the interstitial cell stimulating hormone, stimulates the interstitial cells of the testes to produce the male hormones called androgens, mainly the testosterone. Testosterone stimulates the development of secondary sexual characteristics, which include growth of facial hair, growth of hair in the armpits and in the pubic region, cracking and deepening of voice, development of muscles and strength, and increase in bone mass. They are called secondary characteristics because they are not required for the process of reproduction. They are simply psychological, physiological, and structural changes associated with masculinity and femininity in males and females, respectively. And just like the follicle-stimulating hormone, testosterone stimulates spermatogenesis. In females, the secondary sexual characteristics begin to show earlier than in males. The main hormone involved in these changes is estrogen. During puberty, the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin-releasing hormone. This hormone stimulates the pituitary gland to release small amounts of the gonadotropic hormones, that is the follicle-stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. Follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the development of the Graafian follicle in the ovary. It also stimulates the ovaries to secrete estrogen. Estrogen triggers the secondary sexual characteristics, which include development and enlargement of the breasts, enlargement of the hips, growth of hair in the armpits and in the pubic region, and general feminine appearance. Apart from the secondary sexual characteristics, estrogen causes thickening of the uterine wall in anticipation of ovulation and subsequent pregnancy. A certain level of estrogen stimulates the pituitary gland to release more luteinizing hormone. Increased levels of the luteinizing hormone triggers the mature Graafian follicle to release the ovum. In addition, the increased levels of luteinizing hormone stimulates the ovaries to release progesterone hormone. Progesterone works to maintain the uterine wall thickened by estrogen. Progesterone levels remain high if fertilization occurs in order to maintain pregnancy. If fertilization does not, however, happen, the progesterone levels drop, and this leads to the destruction of the thickened uterine wall during menstruation. Unlike in males, the production of luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormones is not continuous but occur periodically in cycles. And now we look at the menstrual cycle. Now, during their reproductive age, women undergo a monthly cycle in which the uterus prepares for pregnancy, where a fertilized egg grows into a baby. The menstrual cycle involves cyclic changes in the genital system. During this period, women undergo drastic hormonal fluctuations as well as physical discomforts such as abdominal cramps, headaches, backaches, and general nausea. One experiences her first menstrual cycle, called the menarche, at the onset of puberty, usually between the ages of 10 and 12 years. Occurring approximately every 28 days, a single menstrual cycle is divided into 4 phases: menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, and the luteal or secretory phase. Each phase of the menstrual cycle is marked by simultaneous changes in the uterus, ovaries, and the secretion of hormones. During the menstrual phase, the endometrial lining of the uterus and the blood vessels break down and mix with blood, mucus, and other cell debris to form menses. The menses are discharged through the vagina as menstrual flow, which lasts for 3 to 5 days from the beginning of the menstrual cycle. The absence of menstruation indicates pregnancy, ovarian disorders such as polycystic ovarian disorder, or even factors such as stress and ill health. The menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase, which occurs between day 6 and 14 of the menstrual cycle. During this phase, the primary follicle in the ovary matures into a Graafian follicle. At the same time, the endometrium undergoes proliferation, a process of regeneration which results in the formation of a new thick endometrium. Then follows the ovulatory phase, which occurs during the middle of each menstrual cycle. During this phase, the Graafian follicle ruptures to release an ovum or egg cell into the fallopian tube in a process called ovulation. The final phase is the luteal or secretory phase, occurring between day 16 and 28 of the menstrual cycle. During this phase, the remaining part of the Graafian follicle is transformed into a yellow mass called the corpus luteum. The endometrium wall continues to thicken and its blood vessels become coiled and enlarged. The endometrium and the corpus luteum play an important role during the early days of conception. In case the egg is fertilized, the zygote formed implants on the endometrium to form an embryo. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone that helps to maintain the endometrium and encourages growth of the developing embryo. However, if fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates and triggers the breakdown of the endometrium. This marks the start of menstruation and the beginning of a new menstrual cycle. So the first day of the cycle is the day the first drop of blood is noticed. The phases of the menstrual cycle are controlled by interplay of hormones secreted by the ovaries and the pituitary gland. At the onset of menses, the pituitary gland increases the secretion of the two gonadotropic hormones, follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. However, the amount of estrogen and progesterone released by the ovaries remain low, which causes the shedding of the endometrium. The amount of luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormone keep increasing, and during the follicular stage, stimulates the maturation of the primary follicle into a Graafian follicle. It also stimulates the ovaries to release estrogen, which in turn triggers the proliferation of the endometrium. The increased levels of estrogen stimulates the pituitary gland to release a surge of luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormone, so much so that at ovulation, the levels of luteinizing and follicle-stimulating hormone are at their peak. The increased levels of luteinizing hormone causes ovulation by rupturing the Graafian follicle to release the ovum and turning the remaining material into corpus luteum. The estrogen levels also reach their peak and we see the thickening of the endometrium. Meanwhile, the corpus luteum starts producing progesterone. Progesterone inhibits the secretion of follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone from the pituitary, and their levels start to drop. The drop in levels of FSH and LH in turn lowers the levels of estrogen. However, the endometrium continues to thicken due to increased levels of progesterone. The corpus luteum will continue to produce progesterone if a fertilized egg is embedded into the endometrium. However, in the absence of a fertilized egg, the corpus luteum degenerates and progesterone levels fall. This drop in progesterone levels triggers the breakdown of the thickened endometrium, signaling the start of the menstrual phase, and the cycle continues. Now, the menstrual cycle does not continue throughout a woman's lifetime. At birth, a baby girl already have a fixed number of eggs in each ovary. Once the eggs are depleted, the menstrual cycle will stop and the woman reaches the end of her reproductive life. This is called menopause and occurs at the age of around 45 to 50 years. As men age, their testosterone levels may get to decline between the ages of 48 and 70 years. This stage is called andropause or male menopause. During this phase, men may experience a loss in muscle mass and strength, increased body fat, decrease in bone density, and a decrease in sexual function and drive. Now, the release and functioning of the reproductive hormones is deeply affected by the reproductive health, which refers to the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of adolescents. A healthy and nutritional diet for adolescents provides enough calories and nutrients for growth and good health. Iron-rich foods such as leafy vegetables, meat, citrus fruits, and berries are good for adolescents. Fast foods such as burgers, pizzas, and chips should be avoided as they are high in fats and sugars and cause deficiency of nutrients. Personal hygiene is important to keep the body and mind healthy. Adolescents should bathe twice a day and change their clothes regularly to avoid buildup of germs. Women should use sanitary towels during their periods that should be changed every 3 to 4 hours to prevent buildup of bacteria. Brushing your teeth twice a day and regular dental visits are vital to avoid bad breath, gum diseases, and tooth decay. During puberty, the hair becomes oily and sometimes very dry. Regular washing with soap is therefore essential. Though sweat glands are distributed throughout the body, in some areas like the armpits, they get more active from puberty. Germs in these areas can act on the sweat, producing body odor. Adolescents should keep their armpits clean and use underarm deodorants and antiperspirants. They should ensure to get plenty of exercise to stay fit and healthy. At least 30 minutes a day is recommended. Sometimes, adolescents find it difficult to cope with the physical and mental changes their bodies go through. They may therefore be misled into trying alcoholism and drug abuse. These, however, have adverse effects and should be avoided. Similarly, teenagers may be drawn into sexual abuse or experimentation at an early age, which could lead to teenage pregnancy, psychological damage, or infection. To avoid this, proper sex education should be provided to teenagers right from their adolescence.